All right. I think we have everybody here. How's everybody doing?
Good. Yep.
Great. Thank you. So welcome to this session on leveraging BlackBerry services together with BlackBerry Push and Notification Manager. Today, what we'll be talking about is how to develop BlackBerry Push service into your BlackBerry 10 application. My name is Gurtej Sandhu. I'm an application development consultant on our developer relations team here at Research in Motion. I've been with RIM over 5 years, and during this time, I had the opportunity to work with many of our ISV partners as well as the system integrators. And primarily, my responsibility to help bring your applications over to BlackBerry 10. We also have Garrett here as well. Garrett, do you want to say a few words yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my mic's on. Awesome. My name is Garrett Bukaboom. I'm part of developer relations. I work 2 cubicles away from Gurtej. Yeah, I'm part of platform services, so I kind of help handle push issues, support, and try and make sure that any issues that you have or requirements for your applications get fed into product management. So really eager to see how you respond to the push offering that's coming in for BlackBerry 10, and really ready to take any feedback back or answer any questions.
Who sits in between you two?
Oh, in between us is Rob Williams.
Yeah, no.
The guy that does the NFC.
He's our fortress, just kind of keeps us away from each other. Today we're together, man. That's okay. Can I get a show of hands for those of you here that are already using BlackBerry Push service with your existing BlackBerry 7 app? Okay, so we have a few folks that are already using it. That's great. Okay. Now, for those of you folks that are already using it, this may be a good refresher for you, the first 2 sections. But for those of you new, this will be a great opportunity for you to learn why you should be using BlackBerry Push. And also looking at the registration process as well as with the BlackBerry Push workflow altogether. We'll be touching briefly on server-side development as well, but primarily what we're going to be talking about is the device-side development on BlackBerry 10 and how to tie that in with notifications. And also Garrett here will be talking, will be showing a live demo actually of pushing your content to your BlackBerry 10 client side. We'll be briefly touching base on best practices based on myself and Garrett's experiences in working with developers and some of the issues they come across. And we like to share that experiences with you as well so you don't come across those same hurdles as well. We'll be holding a Q&A session towards the end where you'll have the opportunity to ask any of your questions. I'll be more than happy to answer those questions. So let's get started. So why should you be using Push? Well, that's simple. You don't want to pull for your data. You don't want to impact the battery life. That's going to have negative impact on the end user experience. If you want to deliver the always connected, always on experience, you want to integrate Push into your BlackBerry 10 application. As soon as data arrives, you want to make sure that it's delivered to the end users. And build that flow right into your application. So whether that's having a notification such as playing a tune, vibrating your device, having a pop-up dialog, I think we'll be showing something with our demo application as well, tied in with notification. So together with BlackBerry Push, you're enhancing the end user experience, and to the end user, it just automatically happens, and happens all reliably and under the covers. So you don't want to have your user launching your application and fetching that data manually from your backend server. You just want it to happen seamlessly and build that flow right into your applications. So if you use BBM today, you know when the message is delivered. You know when it's received. You're always constantly connected. So if you want to have that same experience built in your application, you want to use Push. Whether you're developing a weather application, a field services application, a cloud-based offering, name it, you can build Push into your application. So there's different ways to push data. One being BlackBerry Push service, second being enterprise push. With BlackBerry Push service, you need to make sure that your users have a BlackBerry data plan. And what you're using there is our BlackBerry infrastructure, basically our cloud-based offering. And more of a prosumer, consumer type of audience is what you're pushing towards. Enterprise push, those devices have to be enterprise activated. And that's where it allows enterprise developers, the enterprise, to make a push from behind the corporate firewall. Both of these have one thing in common, which is PAP, which is the underlying protocol that you use to make the push. What we'll be talking about primarily today is BlackBerry Push service. But whatever we talk about with BlackBerry Push service is going to be translated to enterprise push. Do we have a few folks that are developing an enterprise app here? Can I get a show of hands? Okay, great. Oh, one person. All right, that's fine. But BlackBerry Push service, what we talk about today, is going to be relevant to you when you start working with enterprise push as well. So So let's look at the big picture of how all this kind of meshes and glues together. If you're new to BlackBerry Push service, what you want to do first is to register for the evaluation service. You want to go to this URL and register. You want to fill this form up and submit it. And when you fill this form, you'll get an option to either use Push Plus service or Push Essential service. Now, if you have a mission-critical application where you need to know if the end user has received their push, you want to use Push Plus service. And if you want more details on the difference between Push Plus and Push Essentials, it's definitely all captured in that URL that's there. Both the services are free. The first one is free up to 100,000 pushes. The second one, Push Essentials, is free up to 5 million users. 5 million pushes. Sorry. There is a cost associated with it. I don't have those details on hand, but definitely if you want that information, definitely reach out to me after. And then you want to develop your server-side application that makes the push, and the device-side application which consumes the push, which we'll dive into a bit more in detail later. But primarily, what I want to show here on this slide is you want to test your application using the evaluation system. That is what is there for. You want to make sure that you're respecting both our servers as well as your servers. You want to be handling all the notifications. Meaning that if your server-side application is subscribed to receive notifications, you want to handle all those notifications accordingly. Once your application is ready for prime time, you want to register for your production service. So going back to the same URL, you can then launch your application in production, and then you can make your application available in BlackBerry App World. So how does this all work together? You have 3 components. Your push initiator, which makes the push, and you have your BlackBerry Push service, which is in the cloud, that receives the push and pushes that over to your mobile client. And your client-side application actually consumes that push. So the server side sends a PAP push, which contains a list of specified devices. You can make a push to one pin, one device. Now, if you have class-based users, where you have, let's say, a use case will be paid subscribers or unpaid subscribers, you want to make sure you want to send a push to a number of users, a multicast. You can do that, or even a broadcast, make a push to everybody. When that push is sent, our BlackBerry Push service sends acknowledgement that that push has been queued and accepted for processing. From there, the BlackBerry Push service sends that push either to one device or multiple devices, and your application consumes that push, and acknowledgement is then sent back to our BlackBerry Push service. Now, step 5 and step 6 are actually really important. With the Push Plus a service that we talked about, there's Push Plus and Push Essentials. With the Push Plus, if you want to receive acknowledgement back and your server application is subscribed to receive the acknowledgement, we will send that acknowledgement, that notification back to your server. But it's important that your server also sends a notification, a read notification response back to our server, in a case if your server is offline or online, which we want to know as well. So key features with BlackBerry Push Plus service is that we support 8 kilobytes payload. So you can either send your push all in one payload. If you have, let's say, more than 8 kilobytes to 20 kilobytes, you can send that in 3 pushes. And on the device side, you can actually recombine that, repackage that on the client side. It's important to note that we don't guarantee the delivery of each packet, how it comes in order, so we want to make sure that you label each of those pushes. So you can avoid poke and pull, but if you have a large amount of data, you can also signal to the application that, hey, there's data, and you can pull that information as well. Notification acknowledgements, we're definitely a leader in that space. We provide reliability when you're using push with the Push Plus service. We support PAP, Open Standard Protocol, underlining you're using XML. Developer control expiry time is also a key feature as part of BlackBerry Push service. So if your application is time critical, such as a weather application, and if the user's out of coverage, you want to expire the first push before you send the second push. We support also a device out of coverage up to 30 days with Push Essentials. Reliability is not of importance to you. So if the device is out of coverage, and assuming that it comes back in coverage within 30 days, that push will be delivered to you. So it is actually queued by our infrastructure. Requests are supported via HTTP XML. So you can submit a push, you can cancel a push, you can query for the subscription status, meaning that you can query for the users that are subscribed to your service as well. You can query for the status query, meaning that for each push ID that you sent, you can actually query if that push is actually delivered to the end user or not. So server-side development. If you are using BlackBerry Push Service SDK, one thing I want to note to you that's really important is that you don't have to change that code. If you already have that implemented, you can use it. And you can use it together with what Garrett's going to speak about on implementing BlackBerry Push Service within your client-side application. But there's two approaches to server-side development. First one being a standalone approach. Second one is Push Service SDK. Now, if you want more control and flexibility in writing your server-side code for making that push, you would want to use a standalone approach. If you already have an existing backend server, and then whether it's PHP, .NET, Java, whatever platform of your choice, you can integrate push using the standalone approach. What you need to know is you need to implement PAP. But you have to implement the remaining components of yourself as well, like subscription management. If your subscription management is simple, you may want to use standalone approach. So depending on your requirements and how you want to design your application, you can either use standalone approach or the BlackBerry Push Service SDK. With BlackBerry Push Service SDK, we actually provide you the client-side and the server-side installer. So we actually pretty much do the plumbing for you, and you can use it out of the box. So it addresses a lot of the issues inherent to push-based architecture. But you have to use Java with the BlackBerry Push Service SDK. Whereas standalone approach, you have more control as to what language you want to use. So if you drill down into standalone approach, you're directly using PAP, and you first initiate an HTTP post. You encode your credentials using HTTP basic authorization. So those credentials are those credentials that we provide to you when you register for the evaluation service or the production service. The request is posted to the BlackBerry Push Service URL. A response, you get a response and you handle a response. Any errors that you get, you handle those as well. Subscription management, we don't provide that through standalone approach. This is something that you have to implement. Again, if it's very simple subscription management, then you can use standalone approach. If you want to just know the users that are subscribed to your service, you can use the subscription query to find that, and from there you can push that, make a push to those users. On the right, as you can see, you're basically using standard HTTP headers, using, again, HTTP post, encoding those credentials. The important thing to note is that the push XML request is separated by boundary values with the payload. The payload is unencrypted, 8 kilobytes in size, and also there's 3 attributes that are important for you to know here as well. The push ID, which is a unique ID for each push message, so you can query the status of that push ID, and also the application ID, the source ID. And then you also have to specify the pins as well as to the devices that you want to send the push to. There's also a notification URL if your application is subscribed to receive notifications when the push has been delivered or not. So the Push SDK, again, drilling into the Push SDK approach, the second approach, it provides you a good starting point. We provide you the samples out of the box, the client side and the server side samples. It encapsulates PAP APIs. You don't have to use a PAP protocol no more. You're using a Java API to make the status query, to send a cancel request. It handles all the subscription management for you. It has subscription management baked into it already. If you have multiple applications, such as one application targeting the enterprise or one application targeting your consumer-based audience, that's all handled by the Push SDK. If you don't want to use an installer, you can import the low-level and high-level jar files. If you don't want subscription management, just want to use a Java API to make that push call, use the low-level APIs. If you want to use subscription management and you want to have the acknowledgement management as well, so you can handle all those acknowledgements, you can use the high-level APIs, and those are the requirements that's stated on the side. So low-level APIs, you would need Java again, supported. You can either use Windows or Linux. With the high-level APIs, you need Tomcat running, and the database, you can use MySQL or Oracle. The important thing here is that with the push initiator that you have today, and that you already have, assuming that you already have an application using BlackBerry Push Service, those are already working with your existing BlackBerry devices in market today. What you can do with that is that you can take that same asset, that existing asset, and you can extend that experience to your BlackBerry 10 device. You can provide that always on, always connected experience to your BlackBerry 10 device. And that's where Garrett is actually going to dive into on BlackBerry 10 development on the device side and building push into the BlackBerry device application. Thank you. Go ahead, Garrett.
Right. Thanks, Kurtej. All right, so yeah, I get to talk about the fun stuff. These are all the new things that are new with BlackBerry 10. We're going to talk about some device-side development techniques, what you can do to receive those pushes in your device, and things are handled a little bit differently than they were back in the Java or WebWorks days if you've done any of that development for smartphones in the past. So push services are supported currently on, if you're using the Cascades framework, if you're doing Air or WebWorks, and we've just been notified, it's not even on this slide, but it's on the roadmap, that Android will be supported in the near future. So in an upcoming release, if you have an Android application that does use push, it will be supported out of the box, just with a few minor tweaks and configuration things, but those are all coming down the road with more information. So if you are already familiar with WebWorks, Air, or Cascades, you can go right in there right now and add push into your APIs using the new release that just came out yesterday of the SDK tools. If you need more information on these, we do have sessions kind of going over how to get started development either in some of these approaches. A little Cascades logo rotates because it's all animated. All right. Okay. What's that? Tribesman. I think that's the name I've heard for him. But yeah, I don't know if he has an official name, but we can find that out after. All right. So the first thing that you need to know, if you are using push in your application, if you haven't developed for BlackBerry in the past, we use a set of permissions that you define in your application descriptors. So this gets read by the system when your app first gets installed. And basically what these do is it says to the end user, hey, this application is going to try and access device identifying information. It's going to try and access the internet, and it's going to post notifications. So when the user installs the app, they first run it, they get this prompt up that basically says what your app's going to try and do. So full transparency to the end user. So for this, we need to access the device PIN, so we need the device identifying information. We need to access the internet to do things like respond, acknowledge the requests, like Kurtej was talking about. So we need to access the internet. And then post notifications isn't a requirement of push, but you'll see how we're going to use it to kind of let the user know when data arrives to the device. And so I've got the two screens there. The one is the GUI display that's there built into the SDKs. And the bottom right, if you're doing any if you're doing WebWorks and you want to modify the bar descriptor yourself, that's how it'll appear in the bar descriptor for your Air application, or your WebWorks. All right, this slide looks a little bit complicated. This is the basic application lifecycle of any application running on a BlackBerry 10 device. This is without, there's now a run when backgrounded permission, so this is without that permission set. So there's two states in this application lifecycle diagram that I want you to be aware of. The first one is right at the bottom, where the application is essentially stopped. It's not giving any more CPU cycles. It can't do anything. It's essentially in the background. It can't be seen, and it's not going to be able to do any processing. The next one is the black circle with another circle around it, which is the app has been exited. It's essentially stopped. It's not running. So after reading this and knowing that you always want the data to be available when it's available, the two questions you might have is, what happens when my application closes, and how do I, if I receive this push data, even if my application is closed, how do I let the user know that this data is available so that they can check it out? You need them to be able to get it right away, so it's really important that you notify the user. And those are the two things that I'm going to be covering here. So first of all, just a high level overview of how push works. We start up in the top left-hand corner with the push cloud. So you've already submitted your push to the cloud, to the BlackBerry push service. That comes down to the device. Under the covers, there is what's known as the push notification service running on the device. This is what's going to have the port open for your application. So anyone that's done push in the past, you know that you get assigned a port. That's all gone now. The push notification service will actually open the port for you, listen on the port, and we're going to do something a little bit different to keep our application unique and let the application know, or let the device know which application is registered for which push data. So for now, you just need to know push notification service is going to have that port open. When a push comes in, it's going to have your application ID in there. And through the Invocation Framework, which is used for a ton of important stuff, both for third-party developers as well as on the system, it's going to invoke your application. Now, with push, it happens a little bit differently. Normally with invocation, your application gets launched, but what we're going to do is show you how your application will actually get launched, but it'll stay in the background, so it won't take the foreground. So if you've got 18 pushes coming in a day, you don't want your application continually taking up the screen every time data comes in just because it's being invoked. And they've taken that into consideration when making the APIs. I got my spinny arrow there that shows that's going in the back end. All right. So as far as application flow, I am going to go over Cascades and WebWorks. WebWorks is your HTML5 development approach, but we do have an Air sample available today. We have a WebWorks HTML5 sample available today, and as of today, we should also have a Cascades sample, full sample application. That's actually the one that Gurtej and I are going to be demoing for you after this session. As far as application flow goes, the first thing your application does when it gets installed is it registers with the Invocation Framework. That happens automatically by reading values from your bar descriptor, which also has your permissions. The next 4 spots are highlighted in orange, and that's just to denote that that's all handled by one class. No matter what your approach is, there's one class that's going to be there to register with the push notification service, create a channel with the push proxy gateway. That's a big fancy way of saying tell the push notifications or the BlackBerry push service that's out in the cloud that your device has installed this app and it wants to receive pushes. So and I'll get into that a bit more in a second. As well as register to launch when the push arrives. So by default, your application isn't actually going to launch in the background when the push arrives, so we just make one call, and then read the push payload. So everything from 2 to 4 is actually just one line of code. Line number 5 has a few extra lines of code depending on how you want to handle the push data, but it's very simple, and you'll see that coming up. And then, of course, if you want to display notifications when the push arrives, I'll show you how to do that as well. So just a show of hands, how many people have used the invocation service already, tested it out, or have attended a session on the invocation service? Okay, so we got Martin and Paul. Or Peter. My bad. My bad. Jeez. All right. So anyways, the way the invocation service works is when your application gets installed, it's going to have these values. You put these values in the bar descriptor file. And what this will do is when it's installed, the device reads the bar descriptor. It reads out what permissions your application requires. As well, it'll read this invoke target element. And what this does is it says, hey, my application is going to have this unique ID associated with it. So you put in whatever unique text value you want. This is arbitrary. You pick whatever you want, but something that's going to be unique to your application. So the same thing you might do for the package ID might be a good idea to put in here, so you know that another application isn't going to try and use the same one, or it hasn't already been used. The next thing you do, entry point, which is not important at this time. The type is application. These are just, you have to put these in right now. Once there's more values, it might be something else you can put in there. But for now, just put application. And then in filter, we're going to actually filter the types of actions we're going to handle, as well as the MIME type of the data that we're going to handle. So in this case, the action is bb.action.push. This has to be set, this value. This is just the default value for any pushes coming into the device. And then the MIME type is defined for a push application/vnd.push. That's the MIME type that's going to be coming in as when it arrives to the device. All right, so after you've got that done, you can move on to actually coding your application. So the first thing you want to do is register against the push notification service, or PNS. It takes 2 values, your invoke target ID, which is that arbitrary string I was talking about in the previous one where you define that for yourself. And then this basically tells the push service, hey, I'm using this target ID. If push comes in, launch my application. And this is how we get around using a port. So basically what happens is push notification service opens a port, makes sure that it's available to you, and then it associates that with your application ID so it knows to tell the Invocation Framework which app to launch. And then you also get an application ID. So when you sign up for that push service that Gurtej was talking about, you get an application ID that's unique to you, that's assigned to you by RIM, that you can use in your application. And that's what you'll use there. And this is used to register with the BlackBerry push service in the cloud so that it knows that your device has installed that application and it wants to start receiving pushes. So after you do that, you make a call to create session, which is an asynchronous call. If we go down to the WebWorks HTML5 example, it's doing the exact same thing. You may be wondering where we're putting in our app ID and our invoke target ID. The ops parameter is actually an array, which is going to have all these values encapsulated in it. And then we are referencing our callback. So in Cascades, we'd want to connect our application to various slots to let it know when things are happening, like the session has been created successfully. But the service in general is basically going to handle all of the interactions with push. So that's the thing that's going to let you know when data's arrived or when you're going to register with the service and that's completed. So the next thing you want to do after the session has been created is you want to create a channel. This channel is static. It should never die, but it's one of those things where if something happens, if for some reason it gets deleted by the BlackBerry push service out in the cloud, this is the registration between the device, the marriage between the device PIN and our service that lets it know that pushes can come through for that application to your device. So if that registration dies, you may want to recreate the channel, but this is something you really only may want to do once every 30 days, just in case. But really, like I said, it should stay up all the time. So we take our push service object that we created in the last slide, and then we create our channel, and we pass in the URL that we were given. So again, this is when you sign up for push service, you'll get a URL, you'll get an app ID, and you'll get a password and stuff that you can use on the server side as well. So we're just going to pass that in as a URL. And again, this is asynchronous, and when this is finished, we will be able to start receiving pushes. Now, the only other thing to note here, when you do create a channel, this channel call to create will pass back what's called a token. And right now, as of today, the token is essentially a string representation of the PIN on the device. And we're going to use that. If you like, you can use that to register with your server-side application. So you'll make an HTTP request, say, hey, server-side, I now installed your application. And that way your server-side knows that there's another PIN that wants to start receiving data. So that's how you kind of handle that communication. It's not covered with the push APIs simply because you can have any sort of server you want in the back end. So you want to make sure you formulate that request yourself. But the sample applications do show you how you can do that if you're using our BlackBerry push service SDK that Gurtej was talking about. All right, so after the channel's created, and only after the channel's created, you can make a call to register to launch. Again, it's a simple call. You just call it, and then all of a sudden when a push comes in, your application will launch in the background, and you can start processing on that push. Now, important thing to note is that this basically gives your application some special permissions, so that when a push comes in, your application launches, it runs in the background, it can continue to run in the background, even when other things are covering up the application, so it can do a little bit of processing. You don't want to do any heavy lifting in the background because the application in the foreground is going to get the majority of the resources, but you will have the ability to say, notify the user, do a little bit of processing on the data, and if you need to, kind of make a network request to fetch more data if there is more required. Yes, Peter. All right, that's a good question, and just so everyone knows, this is all being recorded, so I'm just going to repeat what Peter asked. So the question is, does this mean that the application needs to be launched once before it can be fully registered with the push service? So before a push can come in, does the user actually have to launch the application once? And the answer is yes. So right now, the user has to launch the application once so that it can create that channel and register with the push service. So because there are no kind of background running applications, as of today, that's a requirement. It also lets the user set all the permissions in the application. So actually, any application today that wants to do any sort of services, it would need to be launched just to get that permission prompt out of the way as well.
Actually, I think AppWorld now puts that up when you're installing it.
OK, so AppWorld may put that up now after you install it. OK. So the next thing you want to do is register with the Invocation Manager. So basically all this does is says it creates you an instance that you can handle that signal when your application gets invoked. So your application will actually get invoked, but what we're doing here is we're saying when it gets invoked, I want to handle that invocation. So we're creating an object, an instance, so that we can handle that invocation when the application gets launched. So we create an instance of Invoke Manager. And when that invoke manager gets a signal that's called invoked with a invoke request object getting passed in, we're going to handle that however we want in our handle invoke method that we've defined ourselves in our application. And again, if this is a little bit obscure to you, if you're not familiar with cascades in C++, it's okay. We're going to another slide coming up with WebWorks HTML5 as well. So in this method, we get our invoke request object passed in. In this particular instance, I'm setting the icon badge on the application. I just do this myself. I'm going to show you some other tricks on how to do that and have the system handle it automatically. But in this case, I'm setting a splat on my icon so that displays and the user knows, without actually notifying using the notification system, it'll just put a splat on the icon and let the user know that's the application that just got data. So the next thing we do is we make sure that the action is indeed push. Your application could register for a few different invocations, so we just make sure, yeah, it is a push, and if it isn't, we're going to return, because that's all our application wants to handle right now. Next thing we do is we extract the push payload from that invocation request. We check to make sure the payload is valid, and then we check to see if an acknowledgement is required. So if the push server side is a mission critical application that needs to know that the application itself got the push, this will actually just send back an acknowledgement and say, hey, yeah, this push ID, which is included in the payload, was received correctly, and it sends a little network acknowledgement back to your server side. And the ... there is basically just you handling the push however you'd like. So if it's a URL, you could maybe fetch data from that URL. If it's just a little piece of data, a message, you could display that to user, add it to your application. Basically handle the data however you'd like. Yeah. So yeah, just a quick question in the front.
Yeah, just this is from before, but when we were talking about the MIME types for the push notifications, is there any reason why they couldn't be the same MIME types that we would use in NFC?
Okay, so the question is about handling MIME types and if they could be the same MIME types used for NFC type messages. And right now they can't be, because the reason is that MIME type is hard set by the system for push messages that come in. Okay, so that's not something that I'm setting in my push when I send it down to the device. It's just kind of getting set there when it gets received. All right, so yeah, thanks. Doing the exact same thing we just did, we're handling the invocation. So in WebWorks, we're going to add an event listener. So when our application gets invoked, so that's in quotes, we're going to call our onInvoke method, which we've got defined ourselves in our application. And these code snippets, just so you know, are taken directly from the sample application. So if you look in the sample application, you search for this, you'll be able to see exactly where I'm referencing. And then on the onInvoke, again, this is the exact same thing we're doing. We're going to check to make sure that the action is correct, that the push is not null. We're going to extract the payload using the HTML5 WebWorks way of extracting the payload. And we're going to send the acknowledgement if needed. And then in the ... we're going to handle the push however we like. So a few additional thoughts that kind of already touched down on. How does a push initiator know the app has been installed? The application can initiate a subscribe request. It can take that token and say, hey, server, I've got the app installed. You can start sending me pushes. That's probably the fastest way. It's going to be proactive. It's going to make sure that the user gets the application data as soon as it becomes available, and your server gets notified right away. So yeah, the token generated during the channel it does include device-specific information. That's why I had that device identifying information checked off in the permissions section. And then if you look at the sample application, it's going to show you both of those things. So it's going to show you how to subscribe, and it's going to show you that how to use that token and properly send that to the server side. So it is tailored to work with the Push Service SDK, which is a server-side sample that we have for download. But you can always take a look at that and modify it for your own means. The other thing, what happens if a user changes their SIM? So in all the samples we have, there is actually a listener that will check to see if the SIM card is swapped. This is part of the push service. So if the user changes from one SIM to another, they may not want the pushes right away. So it's important that you handle that accordingly and maybe let the user know, say, hey, do you still want to receive pushes and on this SIM card? And kind of give them the option to either disable or keep on going receiving pushes. Yes. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So the question is about between a CDMA network and a SIM card. The idea would be a world phone and switching between networks. I'm not entirely sure if that would get picked up. I would assume it would. But if you sync up with me, like as Gurtesh said, we've got a 1-hour session after this, a roundtable in Hall 1. So if you sync up with me there, I will write that down and make sure I find you the answer. Great, thank you. All right, so getting into notification development. There are 2 different notification types, and this is really how you're going to let the user know, hey, a push has arrived. You can launch your application, you can handle the data, but if you don't let the user know, it's kind of all for naught. So notification service is supported across the board in all development approaches. So whether you're doing straight up native, C and C++, using the Cascades framework, if you're an HTML5 WebWorks developer, you can use notifications. Air SDK has notifications, and even Android uses their notification APIs will work on our system as well. Okay, so for notifications, there are 2 different types of notifications I'm going to be talking about. The one are the generics, the general system notifications, which tie in with the settings application of the device. So it lets the system and the user decide how they want to be notified by your application when a notification is fired off. This also can integrate with the BlackBerry Hub, which is our unified inbox. That's not available right now in the current Dev Alpha release, but I'm going to show you a little bit of how that can work and talk about the settings that are available for that or will be available for that when that becomes available. And it's going to automatically add the splat icon on your application automatically. So I'll show some screenshots of that, and when we show the demo, I'll show how that works live in action. And then the second spot we're going to talk about are notification dialogues, basically displaying a dialogue with a little bit of information in it when a push comes in. So before we get too far into it, 2 things to note. The permissions, I talked about this at the start of the push section. You need the post notifications permission. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you want to make sure you have that enabled. The next thing, you can customize both the dialogue notifications and the standard notifications with a custom sound. This is somewhat discouraged. You don't want to do this unless it's a really important sound that you want to fire off. It's an important message that comes in, something bad happened, you need to notify the user right away, and you really need them to acknowledge right away. And the reason for that is because we're giving the user control over how they want the device to react when a push comes in. If you start doing stuff like that, it might irritate them because they lose control over how the application is going to react to the pushes. So the anatomy of a notification. There are a few different properties that are defined for a notification when you go to fire it off. There's a title, a body, and I'm going to skip down to an invoke request. And the reason why I'm highlighting those 3 is because all 3 of those are used when you're integrating with the BlackBerry Hub. So as of today, on the left side, you'll see the current implementation of the BlackBerry Hub, which is pretty much just a dummy application. It doesn't have any functionality today. On the right side, this is what you will be able to do with BlackBerry Hub once that it becomes functional. If you specify the title of the body, you've got the title and the body displaying there, and you can actually specify an invoke request. So with an invoke request, that will get fired when you actually click on your application entry in the unified inbox, and you can invoke your own application, you can invoke another application. So for example, say push comes in, something interesting just happened, you can click your entry and possibly launch the Twitter application. It'll be pre-populated with your tweet so that you can automatically just hit send and it's done. So you can actually interact with other applications using your push and unified inbox because that invoke request gives you so much flexibility. Yeah, question?
Those push notifications that come in, can they be formatted in a way that, like I know on the BlackBerry device, some of them are an actual message, it's not an email, but
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the question was back on BlackBerry Java, pushes anything data comes in, you can actually add an entry to the messages inbox, like a message, but not quite an email. And that is exactly what the Unified Hub is, and that's what we're showing here on the right-hand side. So the Unified Inbox is really where all of your important messages come, just like the messages application on the BlackBerry Java OS today. It's going to be a lot more powerful, but that's essentially the same sort of thing. So your emails will show there by default. Like right now, we're showing all at the top. So your emails will show there. If you have a Twitter feed, that sort of stuff will all show in that one spot.
I mean, when you open one of those push messages in there, it show up like an actual thing.
Oh, okay, yeah. So can it show up like? And yeah, you definitely have that functionality. So, like I said, as of today, the Unified Hub is not enabled, but There are card implementations where basically you could invoke a card from your application that would have this data, and it would just show up just like a regular message. So you could format that page however you want, and really you have full flexibility to handle that however you like. You can stay within the unified inbox and push that card up. You can invoke your application back from this and display your application, have it come up. You've got lots of different options for how that can be handled. Okay, some other things to note. Key was actually just recently, it was removed for this build, so we're not going to touch down on that too much. And then the sound URL, I talked about that before, where you can actually specify a sound that's included, a sound file that's included with your application. And then category. And the reason why I'm mentioning category, it is included in the header files. However, it is not used for third parties as of today. It's going to be something used in the future, so it's there now. You can be aware of it. It's going to control kind of the type of notifications you're allowed to register for, but it's not used today. So creating a notification is probably the simplest thing you can do. You create notification object, new notification, and then in the next line there, notification notify. And your notification's been fired off. It's done. The user started getting notified automatically of what's happening. Now, the notification is going to keep on going and going and going until you get the user to launch your application, and then you want to clear all the effects. So the LED stops blinking, and the user knows that they've now received all their notifications. They're not going to keep on looking back in the unified inbox. And again, it's going to integrate right with the notification settings on the device. So if the user sets it to vibrate and play a sound when this notification fires, it's going to be specific to this application. And like I said, the key right now is not in effect, but in the future, if it does get added, it will allow you to retrieve a specific identifier for specific notifications and clear those on a one-off basis. So if you fire, say, 5 messages come in and you want to fire off a notification for each one, you can clear each one of those notifications one by one. So effects of a notification, we go in, so say the user goes into our application, which is called notification test, and they set it to it's not playing a sound right now. All it's going to do is blink the LED. Notification gets fired off. The application icon will get a little splat on it. And because we're running in the background, when the application gets launched into its little tile, the tile will actually have a splat as well. So it gives the user full information of which application got the notification sent out. Notification dialog has many of the same elements, title, body, but those are actually used in this case because we can display the title and the body. So the title, push received, the body, fun with notifications, and then we're specifying some system UI buttons. Now, before I get into the coding of this, I just want to let everyone know, if you do want to create a Cascades application, you're a little bit wary about using C++. Both of these classes, the notification dialog and the notification classes, can be registered with QML and fully used within QML using just standard JavaScript. So you can actually launch notifications and as well as display dialogs and listen for when the user closes them. The only thing that can't be done within QML is the system UI buttons. Those are the dismiss button on the bottom there. That has to be done within C++. And again, you can specify sound URL, same discretion as with a standard notification, and then the category field, which again is not used today for third parties. Important thing to note about a notification dialog, if there is something very important you need to let the user know about, this will actually get displayed over top of whatever they're doing today. So in this case, I'm browsing, I'm checking my HTML5 test scores, a push comes in, oh hey, there's a new BlackBerry 10 SDK available. So that will pop up right away. You'll still get the blinking in the top. You can tell it to keep blinking until the user and playing sounds. It's actually really, you can get the same sound playing over and over and over again if you need to really let someone know something bad's happened. And it'll keep playing until they hit that dismiss button. And that takes up the full screen. They can't switch out of it. They have to click that dismiss button, and you can kind of handle that as you'd like. So from Cascades C++, we declare a notification dialog. We set the title to push received. We add a button, which is a system UI button. We're going to call it dismiss. And then we set the body, which is some data we're going to be retrieving from our push message. To display the push, the notification dialog, we're going to call notification dialog.show or .exec. Show is going to be asynchronous, and you can get that callback. Exec is going to be synchronous, so that it will actually stay there until the user clicks it, and then you can kind of go to the next line, which is going to retrieve. My bad. Is going to retrieve what they did, what button they selected on the notification dialog object. So if you're not doing that, there's a finish signal that gets fired off that you can then listen to in a custom slot and retrieve that button information there as well. All right, now I'm going to pass it back over to Gurtej to go over some best practices before we get into the demo.
What do you want to do? Okay, demo after? All right,
Yeah.
sounds good. We'll do the demo after. All right, that was really informative. That was a lot to digest, a lot of new information. But thank you, Garrett. So let's dive into a bit of best practices, some of the things that myself and Garrett come across as we've seen partners work with BlackBerry Push Service. So first thing that you want to remember, and a common mistake that's usually made, is to sync your subscribers periodically. As I noted before, there is a limit on the number of pushes that you can send either using the Push Plus or the Push Essentials service. So make sure that you synchronize your subscribers, because if you submit a push to an unsubscribed users, that's eating up one of your push messages. And also you're just adding overhead to your server side capacity as well. So either you can use the subscription query, where you can query for the number of users subscribed to your service, or you can use the status query to find out, hey, is that user even getting that push message or not? So make sure that you synchronize your subscribers periodically using the APIs, or you can use your own implementation on the client and server side as well to synchronize bi-weekly or even weekly or monthly as well. Another important thing to note is you need to implement an option to disable pushes. So for instance, if the user is roaming and they don't want to have any data charges applied to them, they need an option to disable to unsubscribe from your service. So and that's actually a requirement when you submit your application to App World as well. That is a requirement, and that has to be there. Note that the evaluation service is just there for your testing. You should not be using that as production service. We've actually seen some partners use that as production service. So make sure that you're just using that as an eval service. There's limits on that. You can only send out 5,000 pushes, and you can only have 50 subscribers on that service as well. When you're ready, then go to production. Designed for the push limits, as I mentioned before, there are push limits. Push limits whichever service that you take. So make sure that you take that into account when designing your application. Another important thing that myself and Garrett have come across is that when using the eval service and production service, note that for the server side URL is HTTPS, is not HTTP. And that's actually a common mistake that's usually that we find, and that developers come to us and say, we're not getting our push message. So make sure they're using HTTPS. And also for the production URL, make sure you're using the content provider ID as well for your server-side URL. So when you go into production, you get a new URL, and then you have to replace the server-side, the eval URL with the production URL. So key takeaways. If you are already using BlackBerry Push Service, extend that experience to BlackBerry 10. You can use the existing your existing server-side asset that you already have in place. You just need to simply extend that experience to BlackBerry 10 to provide that always connected, constantly connected experience to your BlackBerry 10 users. BlackBerry 10 provides a holistic platform for developers to integrate BlackBerry Push Service. As Garrett noted, we have Cascades development, HTML5 WebWorks development, Air development, Android development. So we have a good development paradigm, and you can use push within each of those development environments. When you're using push, BlackBerry Push Service, integrate that with notifications, and that's what Garrett just highlighted on how to use notifications with BlackBerry 10. So make sure that you use notifications with BlackBerry Push Service. And with that, I think Garrett and myself would like to do a live demo.
All right. Great. Can we just get switched over to the device view, please? Great, thank you. All right, so what we've got is we've got the default Cascades push capture application installed on our device here. So when you first launch it up, see I've also got my scavenger hunt app installed. It's going to tell you that you've got no push configuration set up. So in here, this is all just done for your sample application. By default, you'd probably have this all hard-coded into your application. But for you as a developer, if you want to get up and running, you can just input this data and not have to worry about any sort of coding before you test out your service. So the first thing we can do is we can switch the mode from public biz to enterprise bez. So if you are targeting an enterprise, you can just switch that right over. The next thing you can do is if you're using the push service SDK as the push initiator, you can check that box there and you can enter the URL. So the reason why that's used is because, like I said, we do have the ability to register your device with the server if it knows kind of what the server is. So you can check that out, see how the HTTP request is getting created if you check that box, and you can kind of change that around to work with your server if you'd like.
So good. So good. How about a use case for this demo?
Use case?
Yeah.
Oh no, we'll get into
All right,
use
go
case
ahead.
in a second here. We've got a whole skit we're gonna play
I
for
know.
you guys. Oh yeah, it's going to be pretty amazing.
We like that fun.
And then at the bottom we've got our checkbox, which is ready to launch the application when a new push comes in. So we're going to save all that because I've already got it all hard coded and ready for this presentation. So by default, we've got no pushes arrived. So at the top there we've got a text box that you can't really see. There are currently no pushes. So the first thing we want to do is register. And what this button is going to do is actually create the channel and register with the BlackBerry push service out in the cloud. So we click that, we're creating the channel, creating the push channel. When that's done, it's going to just let us know that it's registered, and then we're ready to start sending pushes down.
So would this
Do you want to kickstart your server side?
dialog normally show up in the user on a real application, or is this just for the demo that you're doing?
So that's a good question. Would the dialog show up on a real application, or is this just for the demo? And this is just for the demo. So we're just doing this. By default, you can do this all in the background if you'd like. And then once the channel is created, you can let the user know that they're ready to go. It does not normally take this long. I actually tested this extensively to make sure it would not. This normally is pretty quick, but it all depends on, right now I'm doing this all over Wi-Fi. So if there is an issue with the Wi-Fi, if it's a little congested, it could take a little bit longer. But, sorry? Oh, no, that's okay. We can do it all over Wi-Fi. Yes. Then it wouldn't be registered. So you can display information to the end user if it isn't registered, and just let them know, hey, you need to register beforehand, and then kind of let them know that it is registered. So in this case, registration is taking a little bit longer than expected.
Did you specify biz or bez in the app?
I specified biz.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll try relaunching and see what happens. We do have internet access here.
Let's try it out. Live demos.
Live demos. This is all going to be edited. When you go to watch it, you won't even remember any of this delay. We're going to make sure of that. Don't worry.
Yeah, we
Yeah, we got pretty speedy internet.
Okay, that's good. Try it again.
All right. All right, so while we're waiting for this to happen, we'll talk a little bit about the scenario. So basically what we're going to do, if we can get this working and show you guys the push, what we want to do is show you that it is happening all live. Obviously it is live, or else this would all just kind of flow nicely. I'd hit play and it would all work. So I don't even know if we need the scenario, but what we're going to do is we're going to basically try and send a push, but we want you guys to come up with the message that you want to send down to the device. So basically the scenario is Gurtej here is my boss. And he's going to call me into it. He wants to call me into his office because my performance has been lacking and my applications haven't been launching like they should have been. But he doesn't want to startle me. So we're going to, what do you guys think he should send me as a message to get me calmly walking into his office without making me think, oh God, I need to go clear up my desk.
But I think I found your wallet.
I have a big box of cookies.
Cookies. I have a big box of cookies. All right, we'll get that put in there.
Garrett, when you go in his office and there's a plastic tarp on the floor.
This just got really dark. Yes. Really, really dark.
So which one should you take? Who's the
Okay,
volunteer?
yeah.
I have a big box of cookies or what? The cookies? All right.
All right.
So
Okay,
I have
so
a big
now
box of cookies.
I'm registered. I'm going to close the application. I'm going to stay away from that guy. He's been watching a bit too much Dexter.
Dexter.
Okay, we're closing it right down. And then Gurtej is going to send this push.
That's the pin number, right? So the pin is correct, right?
85. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So Gurtej is going to send the push. And if everything's going as smoothly as it has been, we should get this here in about 5 minutes.
So on the server side, it says push has been submitted.
Yeah, push application submitted. So, and the important thing to know about the server side is that Gurtej and I do not like to do a lot of work. We do not like to do a lot of testing.
I like to do work.
No, now it comes out.
That's why we have the middle guy between us. Go on.
So what we've done is we've actually taken a sample application. It's very small, very concise, but this was actually used for demoing back on BlackBerry Java devices. And we're just basically copied it over. So what happens is when you submit the push, you submitted the push,
Yes,
right?
I did.
All right. When you submit the push, you just specify the application ID. You can still say what port you're targeting on the end device. But what the push service does is it says, oh, okay, it's a BlackBerry 10 device. I'm just going to use the application ID, and I'm going to send it down to this pin. So it handles all that for you and make sure that, if it's a BlackBerry Java device, a legacy device, it's going to send it down to the port. And if it's a BlackBerry 10 device, yeah. If it's a BlackBerry 10 device.
Hey, we need a clap. Come on.
If it's a BlackBerry 10 device, it's going to send it to the application ID, and the device is going to know based on the port that the push notification service negotiated. Now, this is all on Wi-Fi. This is all at a corporate event. We have tons of people using the Wi-Fi, and it still comes through pretty quickly. So that's awesome. It shows that you can test it anywhere. It's a little bit of patience.
And we wanted to do it live because just to show that, as Alex said, the API is complete, so we wanted to do this live. So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see about my cookies.
What would be typical for the time from the time the push was sent to the time it's received?
All right, so that's a good question. What is the average, what is the latency expectation when you're sending a push? So typically, if you've got good ping times, if we're doing push over Wi-Fi in this case, which is a little bit different than push over cellular. So over cellular, it should be almost instantaneously. You wouldn't notice much of a lag. Over Wi-Fi, it's going to be a little bit longer. So over cellular, it really depends on the cellular connection that you've got, where you are. But really, it should be. What happens is, when your device is in good coverage, it registers with the BlackBerry infrastructure, and then as soon as the infrastructure realizes you have a push message, it tries to get it right down to you. So if you ever send an email to your device, biz or bez email, and it comes right away, it's going to be the exact same speed.
That's the exact same experience. So whichever way your email getting, yeah.
Oh.
So why is Wi-Fi slower?
Well, Wi-Fi is slower because if you think about it, you don't have that connection open. You don't want to have that connection with Wi-Fi to the BlackBerry infrastructure all the time. So it's going to do some checks every once in a while.
So it's essentially
So you see it.
checking in with the server.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. Like when you think about the way Wi-Fi works and the way push works, push really works over cellular, but it is working on these dev alphas over Wi-Fi. So it is a way to test it out if you don't have a micro SIM with data.
But it will also work in the production release if you've disabled your cellular stuff and you've got Wi-Fi working, it would still work?
It should.
It should work, yeah.
It should work, yeah.
So it's not just for the dev alphas?
No. It works the same way on BlackBerry 7 today as well. Yeah,
Okay.
exact same. So the same experience on BlackBerry 10.
So apparently someone has a big box of cookies, but I don't know who.
Oh.
So
Come to my office, Garrett.
I'm going to have to start asking around for that a little bit. All right, so the next thing we want to show you, how are we doing for time? We've got about 3 minutes left, so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you another just really quickly, and then Gurtej is going to show you one more slide, and then we're going to, if you have any other questions, we'll be happy to answer them over in Hall 1. Just really quickly here.
We'll be out in the hallway as well.
Oh yeah, we'll be all over the place.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to show you, if you go into the settings here, if you go into the notifications, so as soon as your application gets installed, it gets an entry in the notification settings. So if we go to other applications and then we go to push collector, you can see that by default all we have is LED blinking, but we can do a sound. We can tell the device to vibrate, and then Gurtej, if you want to start sending about 5 or 6 pushes,
Oh, you want me to send you another one?
yeah, send a ton of them. I'll see if we can get this volume up. Nothing dirty.
All right.
So if this takes the same amount of time as it does before, we might want to switch over and show the slide. And then you can just hear it when it comes in. If we could do that, that'd be great. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
So there you go. You got the notification. It's tied right in there. So as soon as you switch it over, the user has control, and they can say what they want the push to do. And to the end user, as far as the splat goes, everything still stays the same. And then if the user didn't want the LED to blink when the pushes come in, that's fine too.
So tie it in with notifications.
Yeah,
Make
tied
sure
right into notifications, integrated right in there,
Yeah.
and it just kind of gives immediate
So you have a
feedback.
question? You have a question right there?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good observation. And the reason, so the question is, why did the red star notification not go away? And the reason is because the red star notification is set to go away when you launch the application, but it only gets added when the push comes in. So in this case, it's because I didn't put that functionality into the sample app. So the sample app doesn't actually display the red spot. I put that in there just to show the red spot out. But I was really observant. I'm really impressed.
I'm going to call him into my office now. And have a good chat with him,
Gurtesh
right?
has a box of cookies he wants to talk to me
Make
about.
sure he writes good code.
But if I were to launch this application, so I don't know if you can see it from back there, but if you look at the red spot there, once we launch the application and we go back,
Do you
the
want
red
to change
spot.
that screen?
Yeah, can we change the screen back
Please.
for a second, please? The red spot's gone. So so what happens is the red spot gets added when the push comes in, which also launches the application, but you have to actually launch the app. So I could actually control it so when you click on that, the red spot goes away. I just didn't put that in there. I didn't think anyone would catch that. I was wrong. All right, and then if we could go back to the slide, we just got the last slide to show, and then we're good to go.
I think we're done, right?
Oh, we've got, of course, they've added the 2 extra slides in
yeah.
there for us to talk to.
All right, the 2 slides. So join the roundtable at 12 p.m. at the exhibit hall. I think myself and Garrett will be there as well, so we'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Continue your conversations on Twitter using hashtag and the session ID. And don't forget to download BlackBerry Jam America's mobile conference guide if you don't already have it, and give us your reasons to believe at the 10,000 reasons to believe booth in Jam space.
Yeah, in the Jam space. There's a booth set up where you can give your 10K reasons to participate, give your reason why you believe in BlackBerry and why you'll be developing for the platform. And also a little self-plug, shameless plug. We've got a code hunt application that myself and another developer, Rob Williams, worked very hard on. We're very proud of. So it uses NFC you can run around the conference and get all sorts of little tags. And tomorrow you'll get the final piece of the puzzle, so it's a big scavenger hunt. When you get the final piece, there's a coding challenge. You can upload your stats. You can share little pieces of the code of the challenge with each other. So it's a social aspect. You can go to the porting lab, or you can go to the social desk to get that application loaded up onto your dev alpha. It's a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
All right, so with that, I just want to drop a note again. So this is all there for you today. The samples are there for you today. You can download those samples today. You can, if I go to the last slide again, hold on, the question and answer. So you can download the installers today. The first link, you can get the SDK installers and get started with your BlackBerry push development. And you can also download the client-side application, whether you're working with HTML5 WebWorks, Cascades, and Air. All these samples are available for you today. So those samples do a lot of legwork for you, and just load them on, they'll work, and it'll be a good building block for you to develop on top of that as well. And with the demo, that just proves that the API is there, it works. So with that, thank you so much, and we'll open the floor for questions. I think we have a few more minutes for questions.
We have -2 minutes left for
-2
questions.
minutes
So
left.
we'll.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot.
And please complete the session survey, showing, talking about how great myself and Garrett are. Thank you.
So I did want to ask one question.
Yeah.
Sure. Are we still?
Have you guys ever heard of urban airship?
Yes. Oh, I know what you're going to ask, and I know the answer.
Yeah.
That 500,000 limit,
looked it up
is that
myself.
per month or is that?
It was 100,000.
Whether it works with urban airship?
100,000 for push.